Hi, I'm Beverly Holden, and I've been sharing my journey of leaving the church and embracing spirituality. And last week, I started sharing some excerpts from a little book that I wrote about the story of me that was an assignment that was given to me when I went through a workshop called Breaking Free. And in last week, I just went over the first two chapters of just details of growing up in an alcoholic home. So I would like to continue with sharing my story. Um, and so today I'd like to start with when I was in elementary school. I decided to read the Bible. Don't ask me why, I just wanted to. But I did get very far into Genesis when it said that God rested the seventh day. So I said, Mama, why do people go to church on Sunday? And she immediately said, Well, who have you been talking to? And I said, Nobody. I'm just reading the Bible. So that kind of stuck with me there. But, as the result of growing up in an alcoholic home, I went through a rebellious stage when I was 15. I was very rebellious. I didn't have any respect for my parents and what they did and what they said. Um, but at one point, I was visiting a neighbor, and they were listening to a radio broadcast called The World Tomorrow by Herbert W. Armstrong. Well, I started listening too and became enthralled with the message. He spoke of this being the last days and the prophecies of the end time. Spoke with authority and passion. So I started listening to the broadcast on my own at home, and I subscribed to the Plain Truth magazine, which was written by the same organization. I read every word as soon as I received it, and later I found out that this organization had church services and that they were held on Saturday. So that really got my attention since I'd been curious about why people did not go to church on Saturdays since God rested the seventh day. But late in my junior year of high school, I started making changes um, after I started attending this church. The Bible said to honor your father and your mother, so I stopped being rebellious. I set an alarm on school days so I could get up early enough to study the Bible correspondence course and say my prayers before school. There was one instance where I was praying in my closet. My mom was looking for me, and she opened the door and found me, and that was an awkward moment. Other changes included not keeping Christmas or birthdays. And so my parents were not happy about all of these changes, not the part about being obedient, but they just saw me, my dress, I stopped wearing makeup, I made sure my hems were below my knees, I started tithing, I started keeping the Sabbath. So that was from sundown Friday to sundown Saturday. So I couldn't watch TV, I couldn't work at a job. It was just strictly prayer, Bible study, and go to church. And at the time that I was a teenager, I was engaged to a boy named Ronnie. So it was during the Vietnam era, and Ronnie got drafted by the Army. And so he went to boot camp. And while he was at boot camp, I counseled with the pastor and said, What am I going to do? I've got this engagement ring. I'm supposed to marry Ronnie. And he said, Call off the engagement. You need to go to college. You're too young to get married. So when Ronnie got back from boot camp, I broke up with him. Now, that was one of the hardest things I had to do. I remember crying and thinking, well, if this is what God wants me to do, this is what I'm going to do. And, it would be much later in life that I would learn that God does not require sacrifice, nor was he a punishing God. But there were many lessons that I was to learn as a result of attending the Worldwide Church of God. And I was young, but sincere and earnest about doing what I thought was right, what I thought this is what God wants me to do. I just knew that I was right about what I believed. And it would be 30 years later that a series of trials would help me to loosen my grip around what I thought was the truth. So I'm going to stop there. I'll pick up where I went to college next. This all, why did I go to that church? Maybe it was because the 3D answer would be, well, I was looking for structure. Maybe. The real reason, the spiritual reason, was because that was my blueprint. I had chosen my parents, deliberately chose parents who were alcoholics, and that would create these dysfunctional behavioral characteristics within me, where I thought that I was less than, that I had trouble expressing myself. I kept things to myself. I pretended everything was okay when it wasn't. I felt insecure. I didn't feel safe. A whole list of any of you who have grown up around alcoholics know that there are certain behaviors that we develop as a result of that. And so I set that up, that throughout my life I would be having to come to terms with these beliefs, these false beliefs. If I were to work on the lesson of learning to love myself, I had to come from a home that wasn't as loving as what I deserved, as what I was worthy of, I'll say. And that was deliberate. And so, looking back, there's no remorse, no regrets. I understand now. But at the time, I didn't. So thank you for listening to these excerpts from my book, and I'll continue to share and hopefully share some lessons I've learned along the way. Thank you.